So, welcome everybody to today's edition of our CESI Talks series. Today, I'm extremely happy and pleased to be with Gabriele Bischoff. She's member of the European Parliament. She's vice chair of the Committee on Constitutional Affairs, and she's, of course, member of the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs. Gabi, welcome.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
It's always a pleasure, as you know. I'd like, of course, talk to you also, since you're a member of the Employment and Social Affairs Committee, about the main dossiers. And from our perspective, one of the key dossiers of this, let's say, of this mandate has been also the proposed now directive on minimum wages. We have been very, very positive because we see quite some leverage and leeways also not only to increase minimum wages altogether throughout Europe, but also the general levels of wages. What is your opinion on that? What should happen now from your perspective as an MEP?
Yeah, I'm convinced that the minimum wage directive is one of the big social innovations that we have on European level. It was of key importance to have an agreement, and also if you consider it in a relatively short time for such a complex dossier. We are at the moment in a big crisis regarding the war and a real cost of living crisis. Rising inflation, rising uncertainties, a lot of families that don't know how to make ends meet, or at least they're very scared about how to make ends meet. And there, it was just the right time to come up with this agreement to increase, on one hand, minimum wages, because these are the people that are very much hit by rising inflation, because they don't have savings or other assets they can use. They rely on the wages they have, and therefore it is a very good signal. And this is also why we pledged in the debate in the Parliament member states not to wait for the 2 years of implementation for the last minute, but to do it as fast as possible. And we can already see also some governments reacting to this. But I think also a key effect is that it strengthens collective bargaining coverage and collective bargaining with this. And we have already, and we will continue to have, complicated collective bargaining rounds where people have less in their pockets, and therefore also the signal that we strengthen collective bargaining and that people are up to really the middle class sort of hit by this inflation, and that we need better wages in Europe to deal with the crisis, and to make sure that people have the trust that we can overcome this period, and that we will leave no one behind here.
And you're referring to it also, there's this famous article in the directive on, in the case that the collective bargaining coverage is under 80%, that member states have to come up with action plans. And I think I could imagine that you were referring to these first reactions, as far as I know, also in Romania, for instance, where something has just this article without any implementation, but has already led to political responses. And I think this is also probably you as a former or still trade unionist see a vital role for the trade unions also to push hard to reach this as high as possible collective bargaining coverage.
Yes, because people have to know that they will come over the next winter. They have to know that they don't have to decide to heat or to eat, and that they can have that if you look at the inflation, it's quite different in the member states. We have member states with inflation around 7-8%, but we also have others with more than 20%, and that we have to make sure that we don't have more and more really poor people here with all the consequences. And wage policies might not be able to fully compensate. We need high wage increases, but we also need other measures, European measures or national measures, to support vulnerable households, to support people with the huge energy price increases, so to make sure that we don't leave the weakest here alone, and also that we support everyone that is in need here. And a good wage policy, I think, is the best here. And it also comes at a time where we have big shortages of qualified personnel. So investing in people, in having good wages, investing in their training and education will be key for the competitiveness also of European companies.
You just said it, investing in people and their training education. You've been dealing surely repeatedly also in the AFCO Committee with the so-called quality framework for traineeships. What has to happen there according to you? What are the next steps, and what are the because at CESI always said, I mean, one of the key elements is that traineeships should not be for free; they should be remunerated. Also, simply to keep the young people in employment, but also out of risk of poverty. What is your opinion on the general framework?
We just discussed it this week in the AFCO Committee. We had the presentation of the Commission on their evaluation on the quality framework here, and what we can see already, looking at the empirical data that we have seen, that we need indeed stronger, better regulation of these areas. That voluntary, it doesn't work as much, and it also does not cover certain sectors here. Indeed, my opinion and our opinion is that traineeships are and can be very useful for both sides, people doing it for getting some work experience, for the companies also, but that you need a fair treatment, and also that you also need a fair payment here. We also have a situation, and that was highlighted also by the rapporteur of the opinion we are working on at the moment, that if you come from a low-income household, you have only unpaid traineeships, you exclude a lot of people from gaining job experiences here, and Europe cannot waste whole parts of a generation. So it's a question of fairness, but it's also a question of opportunities for young people, but also for companies to have the broadest there, and not only certain groups that are better well off. So I hope, but I'm also quite positive that the Parliament will continue to push for paid traineeship as we did, and also a certain quality standards more binding here than we have at the moment.
Speaking of fairness and speaking of, how could I say, occupational safety and health, we have this always, I think, in our meeting, some kind of elephant in the room, and that is called the Working Time Directive and the case law. And so, excuse me, and so we have, I think, discussed ourselves to death almost, and came to the conclusion that a revision might be dangerous, might be counterproductive. What is because I know that you're an expert also on the subject, who has been dealing with this directive for in very many different circumstances. What is your opinion on that?
We are, as I said, in a critical situation. We have to do our homework. We are at the end of the mandate now, and we still have to deliver on the minimum income. We have to deliver on the platform work. We have to deliver on the coordination of social security. We have a lot of dossiers where we have to use the time until the Belgian presidency to come to agreements. I could only want to take up in a situation like this the working time directive. It is extremely complex. You have extremely divergent positions. If you look, for example, at the social partners, but also at society, and also looking at the time that is left for the Commission to come up with proposals, I think the Commission is smart enough not to take it up. They don't have it in their work program. And I think whoever in the next legislative period wants to take it up, it would need a very good preparation of a dossier like this if you want to be successful.
Coming to a thorny issue, also the Qatar gate. I know that as vice chairwoman of the Committee on Constitutional Affairs, you have also, I think, been rapporteur of the changes related to the possible changes of the rules of procedure. Now we have the interinstitutional agreement, I think, from 2021. We have the code of conduct, and I think the Parliament's president also came up with a 14 points program. What must the EU or the EU institutions, above all the European Parliament, learn from that, also in view of the upcoming 2024 EU elections?
Let me just highlight, and I'm doing this also as vice chair of the S&D group, that this scandal was a shock. It was a shock in trust. It was a shock that this could happen in this house in such a scale. I mean, you can have the best rules in the world. You cannot exclude that someone is corrupt, but that you have a sort of criminal network operating here that was established over a longer time is shocking. But I think the only thing we can do is really to learn the lesson from this, that we really have to be at the forefront as the European Parliament of more transparency and also of a zero tolerance to corruption policy. And that means, indeed, we will look at our rules. What can we do better? I mean, for example, in these 13 points that Roberta Metsola proposed, also the S&D group came up with a 15-point program, is, for example, that you also have to register meetings with third countries. That was not the case until now. And that we need a better early warning system. I mean, that's the lesson for my political group. And we are very convinced here to address this. We also have an internal inquiry going on, also to see what in our internal groups as a group we have to change. But I think what is very key is that you need good rules, but you also need a good enforcement and control of our rules. And that is something where also we have to be better. You mentioned that I'm a member of the AFCO Committee, so we had a report and we pushed and lobbied a lot to have an independent ethics body for the three institutions. And here the Commission was quite reluctant, but I am convinced that in the light of this Qatar gate, the Commission will change their position and come up with a proposal, because I think people have to see that it has that to have an ethics code is important, but that it's very good also to have an independent body to check this, and so we will in the next weeks and months, we will continue to work on this, to come up with new proposals for the Parliament, for our rules of procedure, for the rules in the House, to regain trust also, and to explain that really 98% of all parliamentarians, they work very hard. They take their job very serious, and that we had a small number of corrupted people, really corrupted people, where they will go to trial, but that also to regain the trust that this institution is able to learn, but also that the big majority are very reliable, very hardworking parliamentarians. But I know that trust is easily destroyed, but hard to rebuild, but that we have to be very dedicated. And I can say also, as a vice president, I take this very serious, especially also for our group, to be at the forefront for transparency and zero tolerance, and show the people that we will deliver also in the future on this. And not only talk about it as long as the scandal is there.
Gabi, thank you very much. Just to say also, I mean, we've been discussing that internally and with different also NGOs, and I always said, I mean, as deplorable as this Qatar gate is, I think it showed also that many mechanisms functioned well. And this is something, once again, a shock for all of us, I think. But as you said, we must learn from it. And I think I am just very hopeful that this will not have negative consequences also for the EP elections next year. And we wish you all the best also in these endeavors. And of course, should you wish so, we are there to help in whatever form is needed. Gabi?
Thank you very much. And I think especially we have to deliver for the people that voted in the European elections, that had expectations, that gave us our trust, and to go back to them and to say, this is what we delivered on minimum wages. This is what we delivered on traineeship perspectives for young people. This is what we delivered regarding the future of Europe, etc. And hopefully also that people will see and acknowledge this and debate it, because what I sometimes do find, how do I say it? I would have wished that we debate and have as much media coverage on some of the good things we do as we had on the scandal.
Agreed. Gabi, thank you very much. All the
bye
best to you, and hope to see you
too.
soon. Yeah.
Bye bye. We do. Bye bye.